You remember that nerdy kid, the one in middle school who spent a lot of time on the internet and dressed up in weird costumes? And sure, all that time on the internet and computers netted me a good job, but it wasn't my passion. That passion? Photography. And it turns out that photography was something that was already in my blood. So if you like cameras, film, chemistry, history, adventure, and a little bit of exploration, then I think we're going to get along just fine. Hey there friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Alex Laux and today I have a developer review for you. Yes, today I'm going to be reviewing the oldest commercially available developer that really hasn't changed much since its introduction. And that developer is probably one you know, and that's Rodinal. But here in Canada, I call it Blazinal. So let's go back to the studio and discuss the background and mixing and handling of this classic Sharp developer, and I'll meet you back here in a few. There are new developers and then there are old developers. Well, Pyro-based developers still hold the record for the oldest photographic developers still available. The title of oldest commercially available developer still stands with Rodinal. The invention of Dr. Anderson, who was not a fan of hydroquinone, began to work with aromatic amines in 1880 before settling on p-aminophenol in 1891. This quickly became the first photographic product produced and sold by Agfa, although the Agfa name wouldn't show up until 1897. Dr. Anderson called his developer Rodinal. Rodinal was unique in coming from a liquid concentrate form rather than a powder and diluted directly with water. Even after the division of Germany following the Second World War, Rodinal survived in both the West under the Agfa name and in the East under Orwo, although Orwo would use the branding R09 for their version. The formula has only changed slightly since its creation, but the use of p-aminophenol, or as we call it today, 4-aminophenol, has remained the same. The major changes to the Rodinal formula came first in 1893 with the initial offering, then again in 1897, 1924, 1941, and the last Agfa-produced version in 2003. Most modern versions of Rodinal are based on this 2003 formula. These days you can find Rodinal under several different brands and names. Here in Canada we have Blazinal. Adox produced it under the name Adenal until 2004 when they gained the Agfa IP and use of the name Rodinal again. Foma has Fomadon R09, and I am sure there are tons of others. Rodinal first arrived in my chemistry kit in 2011 with a small, partly used bottle of Agfa Rodinal, which I used before going to Blazinal. Since then, I've used a couple more bottles of original Agfa Rodinal and the Adox branded Rodinal stuff. Rodinal is a highly concentrated liquid developer that requires you to dilute it with water before using it directly with your film. Like all film developers, Rodinal has some chemical hazards associated with it. More if you're using straight concentrate, less so once you've diluted it down to make a working solution. But don't drink any film developer, nor pour it directly down the drain or into a local water supply. There are two standard dilutions with Rodinal, 1:25 and 1:50. The concentrate is thin and easily poured, that starts off clear and will slowly gain a brown or a red tint as it oxidizes. On paper, Adox suggests that once opened, Rodinal will only last 6 months. Now, if you've been using Rodinal as long as I have, or longer, you'll know that in practice, Rodinal can last 4 years. Even deep brown Rodinal will still work perfectly. I've only gone through a handful of bottles since it entered rotation in my chemistry kit in 2012. I've even used some original bottles of Agfa developer that was sealed in several years past its expiry, and it's worked perfectly right until the end. And yes, I do keep that bottle as a keepsake, at least the last one that I used. Now, for the most part, Rodinal is a commercially available developer, but if you look online, you'll find the method to mix up a homebrew version of Rodinal. I wasn't able to land on a formula that looked right. Of the three I looked at, there were slight differences between them, But if you're interested in doing that, you can do it with Tylenol to provide the aminophenol needed as the active ingredient. So just go on your favorite search engine and search for homebrew Rodinal, and then you can try it out for yourself. But I'm not going to discuss that particular one in this video today. Okay, today I'm here in the historic downtown Oakville, Ontario, and I have my beautiful Minolta Maxxum 9 and the 20mm f2.8 lens. But more importantly, I have my final roll of Agfa APX25 loaded, which I'm going to be developing it in Rodinal 1:50 and shooting it at ASA 25. All right, great way to use a classic film with a classic developer, and we're going to talk about the applications. Let's walk. If sharpness is your end goal, then Rodinal is the developer that will do exactly that. No ifs, ands, or buts. And it does it in two ways, ramping up the contrast and ramping up the edge sharpness. It will in no way reduce visible grain along the way, however. But it will also present a classic look and feel for almost any film you use. Personally, I reach for Rodinal when I want to maximize the sharpness of the film I'm working with, no matter the grain structure, cubic or T-grained. It does a good job with both, but tends to look better on cubic grain films, I found. When I first used Rodinal, I first stuck to slower films, ASA 100 or slower for that matter. Since then, I've discovered that it works great with some fast films. For film stocks, obviously, Agfa APX25 and APX 100 are awesome. But so is Pan F Plus, Delta 100, CHS 100 too, although you really do want to go with the lower dilution on that one. F-Key 50, T-Max 400, and Tri-X 400, and even Berger Panchro 400. But it also works well when you have no idea what film stock you're shooting, or it has no listed times. You can always use semi-stand developing methods with Rodinal, just to get a bit of a clue. Frankly, this is a fantastic developer that I think should go in any home developer's chemistry kit, because it always works, it has long-lasting properties, and it looks great. Okay, so that's the whole roll shot, and I honestly can't think of anything better to use that last roll than to show you the great things about Rodinal. And with that, it's time to head back to the lab. I'm going to get this roll developed, talk to you a little bit about developing with Rodinal, because there's more than just one way, and then some of the qualities that this developer can deliver. And I'll meet you back here when everything's done and dusted. Don't worry, there is no special trick for developing with Rodinal or any of the various clones. The concentrate is easy to pour and mixes well with water. Rodinal is a one-shot developer. There is no way to use this in a reusable manner. Start by mixing the concentrate with water to form the working solution. There are two standard dilutions to work with, 1:25 and 1:50. While 1:25 will yield shorter times, you will see a radical jump in length with the 1:50. In both cases, these will yield the best results with standard hand agitation, but a slow, constant rotation is okay too, and you won't lose much in the way of sharpness, I've found. But like everything else in photography, your taste and mileage may vary. Now, in addition to these two standard dilutions, there are some weird dilutions that I found after looking with the massive dev chart, but I feel that these are more ones that users have submitted to the massive dev chart than anything standard listed on film data sheets. Now, there are two even more dilute mixes that are available, and they're 1:100 and 1:200. Now, in some case, you can use 1:100 for standard developing, but these two are mostly used for stand and semi-stand development methods. In all cases, you can easily use water or the stop bath, especially with the more dilute mixes. I'd personally stick to acid for the 1:25 mix. One thing to note that during stand developing, you do want to have a bit of an agitation about halfway through to prevent what's called bromide drag. But after that, you can fix and wash your film as you normally would. So, like other developers, the final image quality out of Rodinal depends on a number of factors. A film with coarse grain, you're going to see a lot more increase in that visible coarse grain structure than, say, a fine grain film. With a high contrast film, you're going to see that contrast bumped up higher, while low contrast films will bump up to a mid contrast will bump up to high. From Rodinal's sense, if you want to get a slight increase in edge sharpness and more of an increase in overall contrast, I would stick to the 1:25 dilution. But if you want to give that increase in edge sharpness and get a little less on the contrast, go to 1:50. Of course, in both cases, your mileage does vary, and the visibility of the grain is more so on traditional films and less so on T-grained emulsions. For me, it really does depend on what I want the final look to go with. For faster films, I tend to stick to the 1:25 dilutions, while on slower films, I go with 1:50. So, it's always best that you have a good idea of what the baseline of your film stock is. When it comes to stand developing, you're going to see everything smooth out nicely. It's going to have a nice compensating nature to it. Contrast is going to kind of move to the middle range, and grain, you're going to start to see a bit of reduction. And what I really like is that stand developing is great for films that you may not like in Rodinal with the standard dilutions, but you might just like them when you stand develop it. It's really weird, and just like everything, in the end, it's all up to your personal taste. Rodinal's not a standard developer that I reach for, but I keep it because I review a lot of films, and it's just a good tool to have in my kit. Okay, so that covers it for this review. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on Rodinal? Are you in favor of it, or do you just not like it or not use it? And what version of Rodinal do you use? Do you use Adox? Do you have a stash of the original Agfa stuff that's still running? Or do you use the Foma or Blazinal like I do here in Canada? Let me know in the comments. Also, throughout this year, I am collecting your recommendations on what to practice to help level up your photography. So leave that in the comments too, using the hashtag AskALP, and I'll make sure to include it in the last video of the year. So until next time, my friends, shoot what you love with what you love on what you love. And remember, don't drink the Rodinal.